So the first clip, folks, is President Obama. The second clip, and if you can play it right away, Devin, you can? Okay, so I'm not going to set up the second clip. We're going to play the first clip of President Obama. I may talk over it, but we'll play it. And then you're going to hear a response about, in general, to the speech that is somewhat related to this clip from Ted Cruz. Go ahead, Devin.
Or they'll talk about government assistance for the poor, despite the fact that they've already cut early education for vulnerable kids. They've already cut insurance for people who've lost their jobs through no fault of their own. Or they'll bring up Obamacare. This is tried and true. Despite the fact that our businesses have created nearly twice as many jobs in this recovery as businesses had at the same point in the last recovery when there was no Obamacare.
That's not even close to being true.
But with this endless parade of distractions and political posturing and phony scandals, Washington's taken its eye off the ball. And I'm here to say this needs to stop. This needs to stop.
Well, you know, I think it's interesting that he calls them phony scandals when at the time they broke, he professed to be concerned about them. When he discovered that the IRS was wrongfully targeting his political enemies, he claimed he was shocked and would get to the bottom of it. And following the pattern of this administration, he gives one speech about it and then quickly says, let's brush it under the carpet, nothing to see here. It's the same pattern he's followed with Benghazi. It's a pattern over and over again of wanting to avoid accountability. And I think it's unfortunate to see the executive abusing power and disregarding the law.
Now, you heard my rants about that very thing during the time these scandals came out. It's another abuse of power. We saw the abuse of power when he extended the condition of Obamacare to small businesses and businesses for 1 year before they had to comply. That was another abuse of power and breaking the law. President Obama talks about the jobs that have been created more in this recession than in any recovery than in any other recovery. That is so far, I don't know how else to put it. I'm trying not to. It's so far from the truth. It is not even close to an accurate statement. As a matter of fact, there is nothing, not one thing. Maybe somebody else can point something out to me, but there is not one thing that looks like a recovery compared to past recoveries. And when I say one thing, I'm talking about fundamental things about the economy. This is supposed to be a speech on the economy. He talks about political posturing. He talks about phony scandals. I don't know about you, but is anybody else insulted over the fact that he's talking about phony scandals? Phony. As if they were made up. Totally made up. This isn't a scandal. This is just business as usual, maybe, to him, and it doesn't, so therefore it can't be a scandal. It's unbelievable. But yet, that's what we seem to have. Listen to this clip.
This moment does not require short-term thinking. It does not require having the same old stale debates. Our focus has to be on the basic economic issues that matter most to you, the people we represent. That's what we have to spend our time on and our energy on and our focus on.
Well, I got to agree with that.
And as Washington prepares to enter another budget debate, the stakes for our middle class and everybody who's fighting to get into the middle class could not be higher. The countries that are passive in the face of a global economy, those countries will lose the competition for good jobs. They will lose the competition for high living standards. That's why America has to make the investments necessary to promote long-term growth and shared prosperity, rebuilding our manufacturing base, educating our workforce, upgrading our transportation systems, upgrading our information networks. That's what we need to be talking about. That's what Washington needs to be focused on.
No, we don't need to be talking about that. We need to be doing it. I don't disagree with some of that. I don't disagree with. But short-term thinking, as all this Congress, both Republicans and Democrats, I would say especially Republicans, because Democrats have a pretty good ability to think long-term, because they're thinking about how to accomplish their agenda and ideology far into the future. They're a little bit more strategic in their thinking than Republicans. But short-term thinking is the problem that we are faced here with the economy. He talks about investments. The word investment is a code word for spending. We need and must make investments. We must make and start to implement more spending is what he says, is what he's saying. Ted Cruz had something to say about that, clip 9.
I thought it was, this is what, his 18th, 19th so-called pivot to jobs. Listen, the number one priority, I think, of every elected official, is Republican or Democrat, should be restoring economic growth. But the unhappy truth is, in the last 4 years, our economy has grown on average 0.9% a year. These last 4 years have been, I've referred to it as the great stagnation. And it has been President Obama's policies that have been killing jobs, out of control taxes and spending and regulation. And what is his proposal today? Yet more spending and taxes and regulation. That doesn't fix the problem, it makes it worse.
Now, how hard is that to understand? I mean, these are things that I've been saying. He says he calls the great stagnation. Senator Cruz said, I've been calling it that for years. That is nothing more than what we have in the economy, a stagnation. And the idea, the even insult, the pathetic notion, here's what I'm afraid of when I hear the president talking about the greatest recovery of any other recovery. I believe he believes that. That's what's scary. That's what's scary. He's made no attempt to really look at what we have, or it's very intentional. But think about this. 0.9% growth on average over the last 5 years. More people unemployed today than at any other time in our nation's history. And we have a middle-class family in the last 5 years that has been bringing home less and less money. Does anybody in Washington, with the exception of a select few, understand or better yet care about the spiral that this economy continues to be in? I heard somebody this morning talk about how good consumers' confidence is. And why is that if we're in a bad economy? It's called the wealth effect. That should have been the answer that the congressman replied back to, but he didn't think quite quick enough. It's called the wealth effect. That's exactly why we're in the mess that we're in. It is finally the wealth effect, and the wealth effect is a psychological effect. And a psychological effect in the positive will affect consumer confidence and sentiment in a positive way. It's got nothing to do with the real fundamentals of the economy. Nothing. But yet, we will continue to pretend that we have some sort of strong economy, strong recovery, and strong growth with an average growth rate of less than 1%. President Obama says this.
Now today, 5 years after the start of that Great Recession, America has fought its way back. We fought our way back. And over the past 40 months, our businesses have created 7.2 million new jobs. This year, we're off to our strongest private sector job growth since 1999. And because we bet on this country, suddenly foreign companies are too.
Strongest private sector since 1999. You know what's strong this year about the private sector growth of the private jobs? We have a new normal that is a new low for average private sector jobs. We had a month during Ronald Reagan where he created 8 million jobs in 1 month. We're lucky to create 200,000. When you set the bar so low, in this case, the bar is anything over zero, of course 200,000 looks good. But when you look at what 200,000 is doing or can do for the economy, you realize how pathetic it is. The strongest private sector job growth. He talks about how Americans, and you heard that round of applause. I don't know how many people were there. How many people were there, Devin? Was it a big crowd? Did you see it? You didn't see it either? I mean, I don't. So I think that maybe, people always rally when we hear about a strong America and we're doing great because people love this country. But Americans have fought back to what? We still have more people unemployed than we did 5 years ago. We have a labor participation rate that we haven't seen since 1930s. Fought back. We fought back because we keep lowering the bar and creating a new normal to the point where anything looks good. Clip 11, Devin. Senator Cruz again.
My top priority in office is restoring economic growth. There's only one other period since World War II where we've had 4 consecutive years of less than 1% economic growth on average, and that was 1979 to 1982. That was coming out of the Jimmy Carter administration. It was the same failed policies, out of control spending, out of control taxes, out of control regulation, produced the exact same stagnation. So how do we fix it? We fix it, number one, by finally reining in the out-of-control spending. Number two, fundamental tax reform, simplifying the tax code, and I think ultimately and critically abolishing the IRS. And number three, regulatory reform, lifting the enormous burden of regulations. And nothing is more important in regulatory reform than repealing every word of Obamacare, which I'm fighting every day to do.
Finally, somebody said, abolish the IRS. Finally, on Capitol Hill, somebody had the guts to say abolish the IRS as part of a recovery. Now, just so I can be fair, I disagree with Ted Cruz when he said that the only time we had a recovery out of this stagnation was 79 to 82. I agree that we did during that period of time in a powerful way. But you can't throw, I know he's a Republican, but you can't throw the Clinton administration out the door when you talk about recoveries and economic growth. It doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or not, and it doesn't matter whether you like Bill Clinton or not. I'm not a fan of Bill Clinton. That's irrelevant. But if you're going to look at numbers and compare numbers, and you're going to look at economies that grew and economies that didn't grow, if you're going to criticize President Obama's economic policies, you've got to criticize George Bush's last 2 years of his economic policies. And yes, you've got to criticize Jimmy Carter and some others. But probably when history goes back and examines, we will look at the Clinton years from an economic standpoint as a thriving economy. And I believe that it had a lot to do with the government for thriving. But I love the fact that he is saying once again, Ted Cruz, that all the things that I've been saying for so long, we got to stop the out-of-control spending, not add more to it. We got to simplify the tax code by abolishing the IRS, not just tweak a code here and there. We've got to look at regulatory, and I've been saying it for years. Obamacare is the final nail in the economic coffin of this country, and it's got to be repealed. And at least we have somebody. Unfortunately, it's just one, but at least he's working on it and working for it. I guess there's a couple others. Financial issues. We'll be right back after this.